Hello everyone, Happy New Year and welcome back to another video. In this video, I came across a couple of videos. It's a part 1 and part 2 talking about incels. Now, this is something I'm not really familiar with, although I hear it plenty on the internet in several different environments of the internet. From my understanding, it's an involuntary celibate person, someone who longs for relationship or relationship building with someone they're sexually interested in, but has either failed or is incapable of doing so. An organization called The Feed decided to make a short documentary and following up with a part 1 and part 2 regarding this phenomenon, and I thought it'd be a good idea to check it out, considering this is something I'm not very familiar with, and kind of see the things that they uncovered. So without further ado, let's check it out. Inside the incel world.
We've been investigating the hidden online world of incels.
I have not interacted with a female that is not related to me in over 3 years.
They're mostly young men, usually virgins, who can't find a romantic or sexual partner.
I must become more attractive. It's my last chance.
But on the extreme end, some incels are becoming more menacing.
There was quite a few women that I did want to break their nose so they would be ugly.
Where staunch incels blame women and attractive men for the reason why they're not in a relationship.
Around 60 terror attacks that can be linked to incel actors.
We wanted to know who these incels were, what they believed in, and just how extreme it could get. In this 2-part investigation, we gain access to a world that is usually closed off, especially to women.
Damn.
Before we start this story, we want to let you know that it contains violent and distressing content, including references to sexual violence and racist slurs.
Be warned.
We're on our way to meet 5 incels who we've been chatting to online for about a month now. They usually chat to each other.
So are these self-declared people? Like they kind of own the title or they own the label? Is that why? I've only ever seen it as an insult, as in like someone's way of ridiculing another. I didn't realize it was something that people embraced.
In forums and in servers, but today they're meeting up. And they're letting us join. One of them, who we'll call Tom, is well known in the community for building a server, which is kind of like an online chat room. He's agreed to meet us first at a hotel.
There is most likely not a single female on the planet that would be willing to date me.
How do you define what an incel is?
An incel is someone who is unable to get into a romantic relationship.
He's nervous to be on camera and has brought a mask with him to protect his identity.
Being an incel has become quite sensationalist. I am worried that openly identifying as such in public might affect job prospects.
What do you think when you see a woman on the street?
I don't feel like I live in the same society as her, and I think that every woman who encounters me on the street is inherently disgusted by me. I'm physically unattractive, I'm visibly autistic, and I have no experience speaking to females.
Tom casually browsed forums a few years ago in high school. Now he feels so connected to the incel philosophy that he built his own chat room.
Sometimes incels can say some edgy statements.
Can you give examples?
An edgy statement would be something like, I hate all.
So from my understanding, there's a huge lack of self-confidence to the point where they've embraced the lower end of their perception. It's a social construct that they've created to the point where it allows them to feel comfortable in the insecurities that they have faced or that they have established for themselves. This man here is talking to these 2 women just fine in regards to what he is about because he's confident in his direction, although it's to be argued whether it's misplaced confidence or not. I don't think when you have this perspective of yourself, could you ever achieve a certain level of potential for yourself. And if you find yourself seeing this as your potential, I think it's an extreme way of aiming low and not just not aiming as high as others, but I think it's aiming lower than what you're actually capable of and being fine with it. I don't think that's peaceful. And I think that's why there's a lot of issues here.
All women, every woman is evil. Sometimes a small minority of users, when they're lashing out in anger, might make jokes about sexual violence. I wouldn't paint the server as something too serious. A lot of this is just people just having like fun social interaction, fun banter.
In the 20 minutes we spent looking at the chat, we saw Nazi symbols, racial slurs, and unsurprisingly, hate towards women.
This is an example of an incel and a female beefing with each other. The female said, "Y'all are boring," and this incel responded in anger.
You want to read the message?
No. This server has been taken down around 10 times, but those takedowns have not really had a dent on its popularity.
It's hard to know how many incels exist, especially when they connect in private servers like this one. On the most popular forum, there are millions of visits each year. By some estimates, at the very least, there are thousands of dedicated members worldwide.
In the way that it conducts himself, you can tell everything's a shaky, uncertain approach. And I think that has a lot to do with that self-perception that's not concocted with a sense of power or strength. And I think that when we stoop, we're just unsure of everything. Are women dangerous online? Yeah. On average, I think women's lack of accountability in society allows them to be even more dangerous online. Is that all women? Of course not. Any statistic is never all. It's just the majority or not the majority. And I think that when men become more shut-ins, or they don't foster a sense of development for themselves, or they didn't have a proper father figure, or they had an abusive father, or they had no father at all, whatever it is, you mix that ability of being a shut-in and being antisocial, not in the sense that you're a hermit, because that's not really what antisocial means. Antisocial means is that you are the opposite of prosocial. In other words, you are not someone who's actively seeking to better the society. You mix that in with how harmful or how cruel the lack of accountability can be online, such as mob mentalities. It's a recipe for disaster, and I can see why a lot of men especially become husks of who they could be, because this is their only interaction, and they're taught that they're nothing and that they're boring or that they're some negative concept. And you know what? They don't have any belief system for themselves, so that's just what they believe because that's what they hear. If that's what they hear, that's what they tell themselves, that's what they tell themselves, that's a spiral.
I do blame women to a significant extent for why we have so many men single, depressed, lonely. There may be definitely elements of misogyny in the community. It's only reactive to being unable to get with females. It would probably dissipate if a female showed interest in them. What board are you browsing?
G.
We later catch up with the rest of the group in the park.
Hello? Good. Hello, female.
They're in their late teens and early 20s. Most of them haven't given us their real names. After a month of speaking online, they've agreed to meet with us in person to explain a bit more about who they are. They agree to chat over lunch on the condition that their faces are blurred.
Is anyone here dating?
No.
No.
I wouldn't be here.
No.
If you're dating, then you're not an incel. So.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no.
Is that hard line?
If
If you
women-
can date, chances are you can have sex.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make you an incel.
Like if you're talking about going on dates, I think you can go on dates and be incel.
I'm more hardline in my definition.
Some allude to a common incel belief. They call it the black pill. It's the idea that women will only ever go for physically attractive men, that they've lost the genetic lottery, and their situation is hopeless.
Do your parents know that you're an incel?
No. My dad's like asked me when am I going to get a girlfriend or whatever. I feel like my mum knows I'm a loser.
Are you all at uni at the moment?
No, I'm working.
No, I'm at uni.
I'm studying, kind of, yeah.
It's mostly just STEM subjects.
Yeah, no incel's doing like social work or something.
And why do you think it's those kind of...
They're really quick to disown what they're capable of. And the thing about women only being based on physical attractiveness, it's the law of attraction. However, how you carry yourself goes a long way. I guarantee you some of these young men, if they picked up after themselves, carried themselves in a different light and started to believe a different narrative, they do just fine. But it seems like they're allowing what failures they have faced dictate how they should move forward in a negative light instead of what they could do about it and change it. And I think that's the narrative that they're stuck with. And so they're like stuck in this thing like concrete now, where it's like owned and it's labeled. And although they're not as proud to tell others around them, which rightfully so, they're like defining it now.
Jobs.
You don't have to talk to people, you can just focus on ideas and stuff.
Yeah, I said I haven't spoken to an IRL void in 3 years. And that's partially because I do a STEM degree. Like, I've never been paired with a female. Thank f***. If I did, I'd probably just walk out.
I wanted to know what direction the incel movement was headed in. So I sat down with a researcher who spent 18 months looking at the largest incel forum on the internet.
We gathered over 1 million posts from just over a year of activity on the forum.
He found the number of visits were growing slowly and posts were getting more extreme. We asked him to read some out.
So this one is called Women Peak at 12. Who in their right mind would prefer a 22-year-old roastie to this? And they've got an image of a 12-year-old child. National Socialist Germany was the best country for incels. Women are designed to be raped. Males have a sufficient strength advantage, and this was probably our main method of procreating. It's all designed to make women.
This is where settling in that lowness will take you, where levels of depravity become the norm, because that's how bitter they are. They're quick to own this label, but then they act in a manner that their evil isn't controlled, and it is the clear opposite of developing masculinity, because in this way you just strictly orient yourself towards evil and evil by itself, and then you ideate, right? You have ideations of such outcomes. That's not just fun anymore. That's not just silly conversations anymore. When you're putting forth an idea, that means that if you were in these positions, you would act in a manner that is antisocial. And it's a shame that this is a level that some people have reached.
I mean, seem like they're subhuman.
In the most popular forum, about half of its members are Americans and Brits, but there are also Australians in there too. The group we've spoken to have never expressed any of these thoughts to us. Callum says that people who end up in these spaces tend to be unemployed, have mental health vulnerabilities, and are insecure about their looks.
Many users claim to be neurodivergent. Unfortunately, the answers they're getting are that women are to blame for all this, and it just sort of breeds this toxic, violent rage towards women that's really dangerous.
But not all incels hate women and subscribe to the extreme.
I mean, if you live a bitter life and you stick yourself in echo chambers of others who have bitter lives, that turns into a mob mentality. And when you have a group of people that take zero accountability for their actions, ideations, and what have you, that just becomes more, right? That just becomes worse. And you allow that shadow of self to really fester into something nasty. The idea that women are to blame for everything, we can't take that for a second. Because in several other videos, I've stated how it has started with men, and I explained very clearly as to how that happened. For anyone that hasn't seen that. Do women have issues in current society, and are they addressing them? No. I think that there's a lot of lack of accountability on the side of women. But just because you don't conduct yourself in a manner that is productive to you, you can't blame others. It's easier to point the finger, and you can't keep pointing the finger if you're not willing to address why society has rejected you. And that's not to say that you need to be accepted by all components of society, but to be accepted by a form of society in general is to show that you are capable of doing so, because you have reached a level of dimension for yourself. And I think that if we don't reach that, we end up in a dark place, man.
End of things. Some go to great lengths to attract them.
I am making some gains.
For Raymond, he's hoping the gym is the answer. In YouTube videos, he talks about his journey to self-improvement, and so far he's had 500,000 views.
Hey guys, what's up? Decline here. I am 30 and still alone.
We're about an hour out of Melbourne and meet Raymond as he heads to the gym.
I go to the gym 6 days a week. I want to build a good amount of muscle and get lean and shredded. It seems that a lot of people have been successful with that. I still haven't had a successful one-on-one encounter with a girl.
Why do you think you've not had much success with women?
Firstly, I'm a very small guy, like 6 foot guys are a lot more successful. I don't know how to talk to women or anyone.
Up until now, most of the incels that we'd spoken to were virgins. But that's not the case with Raymond.
It has been some time since I had any sexual encounter that was not paid. I met some couples for threesomes, MMF threesomes, and I found them not really fulfilling. Everybody has those same desires to want to feel desired and wanted and loved. I don't subscribe to a lot of the common views of, say, black pill incels. Like, not everything is determined by your genes. These groups, I feel, have kind of hijacked the term.
Raymond is hoping to have changed his luck with women by his mid-30s.
If I haven't succeeded, I'll probably start focusing on other things, maybe just enjoying my life and just rotting, as they say. I'll go back to my video games, start watching anime again, and maybe get a job.
Tom says he's no...
That idea of self needs to be oriented towards you. You can't be doing stuff like this for the sake of getting women. You should be doing it for the sake of building yourself up. The women will come. The idea that he is building himself and he's not trying to have the same narrative, I think is huge, because it's so easy for a lot of men to slip into the bitterness that these kinds will have. He understands that he needs to get himself into the gym to better his body and be a little more healthy, to not play video games as much, not watch anime as much, and things of that sort. So he's aware in that component, but he needs to also understand that how you carry yourself, your posture, your tone, all that says a lot about you. And when you walk around like a mute, there's no real success there. But that's not just women. That's professional development as well. I can't imagine a lot of employers wanting to seek someone who is always sulking, someone who is actively emphasizing their misery in life. And I think that's why it's so important to find purpose. And for men, a lot of our purpose resides in our ability to develop ambition in the proper direction. That's the hard part. But it's not to say that it's impossible. It's just to say that where we are is something we need to accept, and where we can move is also something we can believe in.
Longer involved in running the server, but he's still given up on the idea of ever being in a relationship.
I'm rather content now. It's just sort of like a huge gaping hole in your life and fitting into society, I guess. Having bleak views affects my mental health and many other incels' mental health by making us much less caring about our future prospects. The community is really the only reason why I stay, and as the situation for young men continues to get worse, it is inevitable that subgroups like incels will grow.
In the next part of our investigation,
he just wants to belong. That's really what it comes down to. For anyone that's not familiar with Erik Erikson's work, he's a doctor in psychology. He talks about the stages of development. One of the biggest components that men need to conquer is isolation versus intimacy. Where we fail is either we try to pursue intimacy before we're in young adulthood and we allow that to be a priority, or we didn't have the characterological development to reach it. In other words, the parenting we received could have been more effective. Does that mean that we blame parents for everything? No, I think society as a whole has contributed heavily. But parenting can be to blame in regards to why our children do not have confidence and why our children do not have dignity or accountability. Those are values that are instilled at a very young age. And when we don't hold our children accountable and we don't show why they should believe in something or why they should have no belief systems in general, this can be the outcome at times. And it's very unfortunate.
we look at how much of this online hate can spill out into the real world.
A man obsessed with guns.
With an online history of misogyny.
Killed his mother and 4 others.
Having all these violent fantasies, constantly thinking about it, rape, violence, murder.
And their only goal with me was to acquire some kind of sexual encounter.
All right, that was part 1, now to part 2.
In pockets of the internet, there is a subset of men who call themselves incels. and we've been meeting with them.
Obviously, I had violent thoughts. You do me dirty, I will do you dirty.
They're mostly young men, usually virgins, who blame women and attractive guys for why they aren't in a relationship or having sex.
There is most likely not a single female on the planet that would be willing to date me.
In a growing online movement, many buy into a hateful, misogynistic, and sometimes violent rhetoric.
I don't want to be in those spaces anymore. I don't want to see the things that they're saying.
So what happens when this online hate spills out into the real world?
How did this young man who seemed to have everything become a mass murderer?
Before we start this story, we want to let you know that it contains violent and distressing content, including references to sexual violence and racist slurs.
Warning number 2.
First up, we're meeting an incel who used to have violent fantasies about women, but now no longer does.
Hi there.
Hey, how are you?
Nice to meet you. I used to be a full-blown incel, hate women, you know.
What were some of the worst thoughts you were thinking?
Obviously, I had violent thoughts. I always held back, you know, in real life. Thoughts of, like, women that I did want to, you know, rape. As a teenager, there was quite a few women that I did want to break their nose so they would be ugly and couldn't get a hot boyfriend.
Ryan, which is not his real name, was 15 when incels started emerging online.
That bitterness is just in lieu of pretty much what we've seen so far and how that can kind of boil over.
It was everywhere and I got pretty involved in it. All my friends got pretty involved in it.
The website he visited is now the biggest incel forum on the internet, where hatred towards women is encouraged.
And while I regret having those thoughts, I don't blame myself. Obviously it's bad, I've recognised it's bad, I don't have those thoughts anymore, but all in all, I felt the way I felt for a reason. And I feel like, you know, every other incel feels like that as well.
Ryan says he's always felt like an outcast. In his teenage years, he was bullied for his height, and he says all of those bullies were women.
I was taught women are queens, you know, respect women, all that stuff. I wasn't allowed to ever discuss how bad women could be. I have had a sexual partner before, but I've really struggled with expressing myself to anybody at all.
Now 21, Ryan still identifies as an incel, but is trying to move away from a community that he calls toxic.
The majority opinion is kind of disgusting. I see the most foul shit of my life every day. The pedophilia, it's quite rampant. They can't get a girlfriend, so they're resorting to whatever women they can find.
Ryan says he's seen other incels laugh at videos of people being dismembered, and sometimes even more.
There's a lot of them that just enjoy seeing people suffer. Like, it's stupid bitch, she got raped. She just deserved it, lol. It's really disgusting.
It kind of goes with the idea of the bitterness that they feel and they've established in the realms of their lives, right? I think that that's the only time that people really find joy in other people's suffering is because they are suffering themselves. And instead of addressing that level of suffering that they feel and they realize that it's just really a component of themselves, they don't realize that mainly because they don't see themselves as the solution. When people are that lost along a path, they don't believe that they're the ones that can get them out of it. And so they need something to get them out of it. Sometimes it's the pursuits of what they think is the answer, not realizing that they are the answer. But I think for people that found themselves to be what they need to believe in, they can find it hard to understand people that haven't reached that yet. And I think that you need to move farther along the dimension of believing in yourself to be able to explain to others as to why they don't believe in them. And you can imagine that in these societies and in these little micro communities, you know damn well that there's not a lot of people speaking on that behalf. There's not a lot of that narrative. And I'm sure that anyone that has that narrative probably gets outcasted because if someone comes in with, hey, you should believe in yourself, what's that going to do to that whole community? They're going to feel judged. They're going to feel judged by the idea that someone's putting forth an idea that you can be better than what you are. And if you look at something that is better than what you are, that version of self is going to seem judgmental. Not in a bad sense or in a good sense. It's the fact that When you compare yourself to something that you could be if you compare yourself to only you, that version of self is going to have things that you don't have, and you're going to feel insecure. You're going to feel intimidated. You're going to feel like that's something that almost criticizes you for you not being it yet. And that can be harmful too, only if we look at it in a pessimistic way and we think that we could never reach that. We can. That's why it's a version of us. But what do? I mean, I think people in this community probably compare themselves to men that aren't them. And they look at those men and they get jealous, right? And then they see how women treat them, and they hate the women that act that way on behalf of those men. Now, realizing that at the end of the day, if you focus on you, God only knows where you could be. And if you stop focusing on you, especially for men, I feel like this is kind of the rock bottom that you may hit. And hearing some of the dialogue, I honestly didn't know it was this bad.
They just sort of brush it to the side, like, oh, these are just satirical posts. It's like, no, they do feel that way.
Yeah. They absolutely feel that way.
Incels are mostly young men who believe women will only ever date the most attractive guys. It's a community fixated on its inability to find a partner or have sex. But when Ryan got a girlfriend, he was shunned.
You're a traitor, get out, you're not incel. Slowly over time realised that if I keep having this horrible, toxic mindset, I'm never going to go anywhere in life.
Even though he's trying to leave the incel world, he still has some strong feelings towards women.
It's more just jealousy that women sort of get dealt a little bit of an easier hand in life than men. Like, it's always expected for men, approach the girl, buy her stuff, shit like that. These days I feel pretty neutral about women. I don't hate them as violently as I used to.
And while Ryan hasn't acted on those violent thoughts, others have.
I think that's one of the big components, as he stated. Yes, do women have it easier in life? Absolutely. I think that people that feel that they don't are people that aren't really looking at the perspective of men and how they have to navigate life as typically the provider in a lot of cases. But you don't use that for judgment. Do men have it harder in a lot of areas of life? Yeah, there's statistics that prove that. That's why our suicide rates are so high. That's why we die sooner. That's why we're in prison more. That's why we have a lot of components to ourselves that display why our life is so much harder. But that's not a soapbox to stand on. We can't use that and then point at people. You can't use that and then blame women. No, you use that for yourself to understand that this is the reality that you're in. You're gonna have to deal with it. And I think that that's why finding a purpose is so important, because it allows us to combat that misery. And that's the misery that needs to be addressed, because if we don't achieve order for the chaos felt because of that misery, we will succumb to it. And we will use that as blame. It's like, the only reason my life sucks is because women have it easier. It's just like, no, your life sucks because you're not doing anything about it. You know that it's unfair, and you're still not doing anything about it. The reality is that the world is unfair, and it's also unfair for women as well. Women haven't evolved in the ability that men have in regards to responsibility and accountability. They have evolved with the idea of being provided to. That's why women aren't as decisive, biologically speaking. They've always been provided for, and so they have evolved along that dimension, if we're talking thousands and thousands of years. And so now they're currently in a society where they're given this power, and it's stressful. You see a lot of women that are combating the idea of they want a partner, they want a family, they don't want a family, and there's a lot of uncertainty there. Point is that it's hard for both genders. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that we need to accept our hardships. If we don't accept our hardships, then we're going to look at it as a tool to blame others. That's never going to help you reach anything.
Josh is a researcher who's been looking at the link between incels and violent terror attacks.
We know that they're on the increase internationally. In North America, 60 terror attacks that can be linked to incel actors.
One of those terror attacks was the infamous killing spree of Elliot Rodger.
7 people are dead and another 13 injured in what Californian police have called a premeditated mass murder.
Before his attack, he published a lengthy manifesto blaming women and attractive men for why he hadn't found a girlfriend. More recently, a British incel posted videos raging against his mother and his inability to attract women. After posting those videos, he killed 5 people, including his mother.
The vast majority of incels are reasonably peaceable. In relation to attacks carried out by incels in Australia, there are no known attacks.
But he believes incels may be linked to other crimes.
Law enforcement aren't always attuned to what may constitute an incel terror attack. In many cases, they've been treated as murders rather than terror attacks by authorities.
On a number of occasions, Australia's National Intelligence Agency, ASIO, has called out incels as a potential threat to national security.
They are just violent extremist misogynists who believe women are the root of all of their problems, and they've killed people overseas. And we have people with those beliefs here in this country.
So then before we move on, I think what society is also misunderstood is that they want to talk about the outcome of such bitterness, but they don't want to address why they reached that point or why they exist in that sense of belief towards themselves. Because all they're looking at as, oh, this is another terrorist group. How do we protect against this? Just like how do you implement components of society to uplift men more often? Because we have seen several videos so far that show the downfall of men in general. And that's why I decided to come to such a platform on behalf of uplifting others. Because there's a whole lot of lack of accountability. There's a whole lot of mob mentality. There's a whole lot of ridicule and criticism and unfair criticism in that regard. And I guess my perspective is, what are we doing to help those communities? What are we doing to uplift that mentality? What are we doing to instill the idea of self-work? And why is it that our only concern is the outcome after the pot is boiling over?
I and a lot of the other younger girls and boys in these communities were effectively groomed by the older people around us.
Although the majority of incels are men, Lani was one of the few women allowed into the community. She connected in online chat rooms.
In most of these community servers, you would find probably 2 to 5 women, and everyone knows who they are. I guess I've always felt pretty outcasted in school. I'd say that was one of the main reasons I stuck around, because you get that attention, and I didn't really get that outside of the internet.
Lani was 14 when she joined the incel community. But by 16, she wanted nothing to do with it.
There were a lot of older men weaseling their way into your close circle and getting you to open up, even get us to lie about our ages, and their only goal with me was to acquire some kind of relationship or sexual encounter. They go for younger women because they're typically more vulnerable.
And what kind of things would they tell you?
Like typical grooming things, phrases like, "You're so mature for your age," or "You're not like the other girls."
With some of the incels, she had online and real-life connections, but she says many of them used her.
I experienced sextortion. My first experiences were them taking photos or videos of me without my knowledge in very compromising positions, and then threatening me with those things to post it online into the dark web, possibly, and have it circulate for the rest of your life.
I thought the idea of incel was that they're involuntarily celibate, but with women, their celibacy is a choice, and whether they continue that or discontinue it, it's still a choice. I don't see, because women often have the power of sexual activity. If we remove the idea of sexual assault and things of that nature, it's always the woman that gives the yes or gives the no. It is in women's power to do so. I guess what I'm saying is it just me, or am I viewing this as contradictory? I think that women can't be incel. That's my perspective, because they have the power. And if they aren't being successful in regards to relationships, I think it just requires a shift of community. Because as she's around some pretty evil types, especially if you're in the bitterness of the male population that's in this kind of belief. That's obviously a bad place for any woman, I think. And I guarantee you that if she shifted out of that community, she would probably get less manipulated or less attacked. But I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. That's just my perspective. I'm not addressing the 1% of men who share that sexual availability of women. I'm not talking about the top 1% of men. I'm talking about women on average. And I feel like women on average have the access or the means to do so should they want to.
And she says what happened to her isn't even the worst of what she saw inside the community.
In most of the communities, majority of the guys had some story where they had been accused of something, the most severe being rape.
Lani told me that other incels overseas had been arrested for violence and being with underage girls.
After the second or third one, I was like, okay, there is definitely a pattern here. I don't want to be in those spaces anymore. I just don't want to be there. I don't want to see the things that they're saying, and I don't want to know about, what's happening in there.
There are hundreds, potentially tens of thousands of men in Australia who feel so marginalised from wider society that they need to gather in these communities to find some sort of connection with others.
Josh says it's difficult to engage with incels, who are often hidden away in private online communities.
There is a vacuum of information for young men who spend a good chunk of their lives online, who are being hit with misogynistic material not only daily but hourly, by the minute.
These men can also be very impressionable. And these are just the societies they fall into because of online entertainment, digital entertainment, and things of that sort. And that can play a part too. Maybe these people that didn't even have these belief systems, but then they fell in with the wrong crowd and they started to pitch the same pitch that they have. I think this is what those posts on the male loneliness epidemic were about. Hey men, have you tried not raping or things of that sort? And I think that plays a huge part in the idea of what kind of communities they're talking about. Because like I said, I didn't really know about these kind of communities. I didn't even think this really existed. I knew evil existed in general, and that's why I'm not surprised. I just didn't realize that it was common to foster such communities.
So now that you're trying to put some distance between yourself and the community, where does that leave you?
Well, it's only up from here, I think. It's nothing but toxicity for the most part, so I think I'm just going to move on from it completely. Eventually. I think it'll take a few years.
Why do you think it'll take a few years?
It's just all the mental conditioning that I've experienced as a teenager. I've got to sort of reverse most of that thinking.
So for someone who hasn't reached the same headspace as you, how do you think we can engage with those incels still in the community?
Take them seriously. Treat them like humans, because that's what they've really sort of deep down always wanted.
Yep. Whew. Damn. The extremity of that caught me off guard in a sense. I guess when you're aware of such evil that does exist in society, and then you see forms of it. Now, it's one thing to be aware of it, but then to see forms as it's carried out and the strong belief behind it, that's wild. And I think the one thing to take away is if we continue to live in neglect, we will reach these levels of depravity. We can fall that hard. And as we see, we either open that hole to hell or we move on, as the man in the final component did, where he realized that he just needed to move on from this. And this is something that is holding him back. And I think that's one of the greatest things to establish is although we may feel like women are to blame for whatever, I think we also need to hold ourselves accountable. If we're going to hold anyone accountable, we need to start from us. We need to work from inside out. And if you come out into life swinging on people you want to blame, I'm going to tell you right now, that's not how it works. And all we're doing is using that bitterness and that negative energy felt that we're just fostering, right? That is just growing. It's going to be aimed at someone. And that violence comes from men more often than not. That's not to say that women aren't capable of violence. They're capable of relational violence, and that's a different form. But men are naturally more visually aggressive in their beliefs and their actions. Hence why you have such outcomes. I guess the message that I have is work on you. Work on you. If you decide to hold yourself accountable in the wide severity that you're holding women accountable, you'd be surprised how much you could reach if you pointed that finger at you first. And I think that you should actively seek for things to be accountable for and lower yourself so that you can see them and not think that you are above your ability to hold yourself accountable. Don't be neglectful. Don't ignore your own mess. You can't have a mess in your life and then point at someone else's. Who are you to judge? You haven't done anything, and so you think that you stand on a soapbox by pointing fingers. That's why I don't believe in using the narrative of, well, men have it harder, that's why I'm this way. I don't believe in that. It's not that I don't believe that men don't have it harder. I think they do. But using that as an approach to life, I disagree. I think that's something to be understood. It's like, well, yes, but what are you going to do about it? Is that what you're going to complain about? And I don't think that's fair to you and what you could be. That's not to say that I'm judging anyone for doing so. I think that the one thing that I want people to understand is that I want the best for everyone. And that means that I want everyone to enact their own potential. I want them to achieve order in their chaos. I want them to move along that dimension enough to know that they don't need to listen to someone like me no more, right? Or that they don't need to listen to anyone because they have established their own compass. And I think that that's more important than anything. And I think that as we learn that sense of accountability for ourselves, can we address how we fit in society effectively? And we don't get into a mob mentality. I think the last thing we should do is just get in a damn mob. I don't think that ever solved anything. So it was a very interesting video by the feed that got dark real quick. And I think that I can reasonably see why it does. It was along my area of expertise. It was something I did want to get into because I am concerned with people's cognitions. I am concerned with people's mentalities and their perspectives on life. That is just the thing I've been pitching this whole time. And so I felt that these kind of videos did fall in line with that approach, but I didn't know it was going to be that intense. So apologies for anyone that was offended. I apologize for anyone that was triggered by some of the commentary or some of the narrative and the verbiage that was viewed. That's obviously not the intention. The intention was to review something that is a current problem in society and then also put forth what I think can be done about it, considering where I come from in my own world. So with that being said, thank you for everyone that watched the video so far. Please comment, like, and subscribe. And if you dislike the video, then dislike it and you'll never see me again. But also leave a comment in the comment section down below for what you thought about this problem and how you think you could address it and what you think the true problem is. I've kind of stated my opinion. I look forward to hearing about yours. Thanks again, and I'll go ahead and see you next time.